皆様、お待たせいたし。
Thank you very much for waiting, ladies and gentlemen. So, would you please go back to your seat? And thank you very much for joining us. Now, we would like to begin the Earth Forum Kyoto International Symposium. And so let me introduce myself, Teresa Yoshida. I'm going to be a MC for this event following the commendation ceremony. First of all, I would like to invite Chairperson of the Earth Forum Kyoto and President of Kyoto University, Juichi Yamagiwa, for opening remarks. I am deeply grateful that International Symposium of the Earth Forum Kyoto is now opened with such large audience. On behalf of the organizer, I would like to say a few words for the opening. First of all, I wish to congratulate IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, and Ms. Mary Robinson on their induction into the Earth Hall of Fame Kyoto. And also, I wish to express my heartfelt welcome and gratitude to all the researchers, members of Kyoto Prefecture and municipal assemblies, representatives from affiliate organizations, institutions, and NPOs, and citizens of Kyoto Prefecture and Kyoto City. Thank you very much for coming. I would like to express my heartfelt welcome to you all. As you all know, a wide range of issues that we human beings created, deforestation, food crisis, depletion of resources, losses of biodiversity, as well as global warming, interact each other, posing an existential threat to mankind. In order to address them, we must be aware of finite resources on the globe and carry forward range of effort for developing sustainable society where the environment, society, and economy are well balanced in accordance with the principles set forth in UN Sustainable Development Goals. In this forum was established by Kyoto Prefecture, Kyoto City, Kyoto University, Kyoto Prefecture University, and Research Institute for Humanity and Nature, and International Research Center for Japanese Studies, aiming at making proposals for new values and socio-economic system which can serve to create sustainable society. And this is the 11th International Symposium. Today we will have commemorative lectures delivered by the awardees and panel discussions with intellectuals under the theme of connecting to the future the current states of climate change and the Earth. A series of researches carried out primarily by the IPCC has identified anthropogenic greenhouse gas emissions as a major cause of global warming and associated extreme weather events, and advancement of science and research on accurate measurement of GHG emissions and prediction of future temperature rise are indispensable for the implementation of international agreements such as the Kyoto Protocol and Paris Agreement. On the other hand, in order to change our thinking and our behaviors, not only scientific evidence but also underlying principles and thought play crucial roles. climate justice advocated by Ms. Robinson is an attempt to address climate issues from human rights perspectives, because it is indeed injustice that those who are affected the most by climate change, such as drought and sea rise, are not developed countries and affluent people. They are actually developing countries and those who are in poverty. And climate justice also advocates to render due considerations to the environment of the future generations, because they also will be affected, and it is one of the underlying ideas of the Paris Agreement. This is properly translated in Japanese, and this is very important ideas in the Paris Agreement as well. So in the panel discussion, we will invite business person and high school students as well to discuss how we should confront climate change based on the latest scientific findings and perspective of climate justice. And I would like to encourage our audience also think it together. I sincerely hope that you will enjoy today's International Symposium. And now, let me close my opening remarks by wishing you all good health and happiness. February 11th, 2020, Chairperson of Kyoto Earth Forum, Juichi Yamagiwa. Thank you very much.
ご挨拶を申し上げました。
Thank you very much. Now I would like to introduce Dr. Hoesung Lee, who has become the inductee to the Earth Hall of Fame Kyoto, to give us his commemorative lecture. Dr. Hoesung Lee, IPCC Chair, please come up to the stage. Let us give him a big applause.
The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC, has a goal to assess scientific, technical, and socioeconomic information relevant to the understanding of human-induced climate change, the potential impacts of climate change, and options for mitigation and adaptation. It has 3 working groups, and it also has a task force on national greenhouse gas inventories, which develops and refines an internationally agreed methodology for the calculation and reporting of national greenhouse gas emissions and removals. This methodology, updated in 2019, is used to report national emissions inventories to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. And this particular report was made possible under the leadership of Dr. Kyoto Tanabe. Japan hosted the technical support unit for the task force at the Institute for Global Environmental Strategies for the past 20 years. The IPCC's main product is comprehensive assessments conducted at intervals of 5 to 7 years of the scientific literature relating to human-induced climate change. As you probably heard already, Working Group 1 deals with climate science, and Working Group 2 deals with the impacts and vulnerabilities, and Working Group 3 deals with climate mitigation and various measures to achieve that mitigation. As part of each assessment cycle, the IPCC also prepares a number of special reports. And this cycle, we have produced 3 special reports, which was somewhat unheard of in IPCC history. The most IPCC did was to produce 2 special reports, but in this cycle, we did produce 3. And those 3 reports are, the first one is the climate change the special report on the global warming of 1.5 degrees Celsius. And the second one is about the climate change and land. And the third one was about the climate change and oceans and cryosphere. And then from now on until 2022, our three working groups will produce their main assessment reports. And then finally, in first half 2022, we will produce a synthesis report, which is the comprehensive summary of the AR6 assessment efforts. Let me turn briefly to some of the findings from the three special reports to give you a perspective on the state of climate, as well as our understanding of the future of the challenges that we face for the humanity as a whole. The Paris Agreement objective is to hold the increase in the global average temperature increase well below 2, and perhaps want to achieve to limit it to 1.5 degrees Celsius. The human activities have already estimated to have caused approximately 1 degree Celsius global warming above pre-industrial levels. Limiting warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius is still feasible, but very challenging. Current national commitments are not sufficient to limit warming to 1.5 degrees. If continued in this way, without ramping up additional effort to limit the increase in greenhouse gases, then the current estimate will be something close to 3 degrees by the end of 2100. The global net anthropogenic CO2 emissions must reach net zero around 2050, and the reductions of non-CO2 emissions are also required. Land surface temperature has increased nearly twice as much as the global average surface temperature, which means that 1 degree Celsius increase so far means for certain regions, including Arctic mostly, increased more than 1 degrees, close to, in the Arctic, close to 3 degrees already. The climate change, including the frequency, intensity of extremes, has adversely impacted food security and terrestrial ecosystems. Global warming has warmed the oceans and reduced glaciers and ice sheets. As a result, sea levels are rising at an accelerating rate. Sea level rise, together with increases in tropical cyclone winds, rainfall, and extreme waves, exacerbate coastal hazard. As the atmospheric concentration of CO2 rises, more is absorbed by oceans, and the surface layer of oceans becomes more acidic. The surface layer also is losing oxygen as a result. Those changes, together with the rising temperature, are changing the abundance and distribution of marine ecosystems. The risks of adverse climate impacts rise with the amount of warming. They are higher for warming of 2 degrees than for warming of 1 degree. The difference turned out to be much more significant than we have so far understood. A smaller global average temperature increase means lower climate-related risks to health, livelihoods, food security, water supply, human security, and economic growth. The emission reductions needed to limit warming to 1.5 degrees require rapid, far-reaching transitions in energy, land, transport, buildings, and industrial systems. To reach net zero by 2050, emissions reductions are required in all sectors. Those emission reduction requirements create opportunities for new and improved technologies. Funding the research and implementation of those technologies requires a shift and likely an increase in investment that would need to be financed. adaptation is unavoidable. Adaptation will be needed regardless of our success in limiting the temperature increase. Climate change impacts are diverse, vary widely by location, and are in some cases irreversible. Adaptation measures, however, cannot fully offset climate change impacts, so some losses and damages are inevitable. Since impacts rise with the temperature increase, the scale of the adaptation effort and the magnitude of residual damages rise with temperature increase. Many land-related response measures, such as the sustainable land management, contribute to climate change adaptation, can also enhance food security and combat desertification and land degradation. Most of the response options contribute positively to sustainable development and other societal goals. In many areas, adaptation to climate change impacts on oceans and cryosphere ecosystems, including the related areas, will only be effective under the lowest levels of warming. While a variety of adaptation options are available to adapt to sea level rise, the options available to a specific coastal community are often limited and may be costly. People with the highest exposure and vulnerability are often those with the lowest capacity to respond, particularly in low-lying islands and coasts, the Arctic and high mountain regions, let alone the developing countries in those regions. Therefore, international finance and technology support are crucial for poorer countries with regions vulnerable to relatively large adverse impacts. The three special reports indicate that limiting warming to 1.5 degrees is still feasible, but is very much required. But we are not on track to do so. Therefore, more rapid emissions reduction must begin very soon if global anthropogenic CO2 emissions are to be reduced to net zero around 2050. Prompt, aggressive action to reduce emissions creates opportunities for new and improved mitigation adaptation technologies. Along with them, economy will also prosper, along with new technologies and innovations. It also reduces adaptation costs and residual damages, and it minimizes the scale of the international support that will be needed by vulnerable people such as residents of low-lying islands. The ongoing sixth assessment report, which, as I said before, will be completed in 2 years of time from now, will complement the information in the special reports that we already have with advances in AR5 in the science of climate change, its impacts and responses to it. We believe that time has come to see that climate action is the action for now and the near term. And the AR6 synthesis report should be able to address the divergence between the scientific understanding and the realities of climate action. We hope that for this cycle's sixth assessment report, as well as its synthesis report, to be relevant to policy leaders and societies, it should, first of all, it should be able to connect the climate concerns to the immediate economic, societal concerns and options. And also, it should be able to link climate action to opportunities for innovation and development. And it also should be able to incentivize stakeholders to support climate action. And finally, it should be able to support the approach climate risks from the perspective of the private and public sector decision frameworks, where the perceptions of climate risks is compared, weighed against other extant and contingent development challenges and opportunities. We therefore hope that our ongoing assessment, as well as its concluding synthesis report, should provide an integrative, holistic understanding of 4 factors. One is climate, economy, environment, and society. We believe that these 4 factors are inseparable, and we should be able to understand these 4 factors in an integrative and holistic manner. That's our goal in this cycle. Thank you very much for your attention.
Dr. Hoesung Lee, thank you very much. Next, inductee to the Earth Hall of Fame Kyoto, Ms. Mary Robinson, former President of Ireland, former UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, has sent us a video message. She was unable to attend this ceremony, but she has sent us her message via video.
Greetings to you all, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, and school children, our future leaders. It's with great regret that I cannot be with you in person today to acknowledge the great honour of being inducted into the Earth Hall of Fame Kyoto. I'm delighted to hear that this message will be seen for the first time in the history of the award by private firms and school children. I believe this is an important reflection of the way the whole world has woken up to the profound impact humans have had on our planet. To introduce myself, I'm from Ireland, and I was my country's first woman president from 1990 to 1997. I then worked as the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights and have had the privilege of fulfilling a number of other roles with the UN since then. More recently, I might describe myself as an angry granny, someone who is angry with the social and economic injustice of climate change and the dire state of the world we are leaving for our children and grandchildren. That's why I have committed much of my time over the past 15 years to exploring the issue of climate justice. I'm also chair of the Elders, an independent group of global leaders founded by Nelson Mandela in 2007, working together for peace, justice, and human rights. The Elders are dedicated to tackling the climate emergency. We stand firmly behind the objective of limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius and the goal of global carbon neutrality by 2050. The world faces a climate emergency, a crisis so great it challenges our very existence. And as is often the case with injustice, it's the poorest in our world, those least responsible for climate change, who will bear the greatest burden of its consequences. Yet together, if we act with the resolve needed, we also have an opportunity to avert the worst consequences of this climate disaster. But we need to act quickly. We need to act now. I want to directly thank the Japanese school children listening to this message today. I've seen how, over the past year, the Fridays for Future movement has begun to gain momentum in Japan. Along with the rest of the world, young Japanese people have started to raise awareness of the climate crisis. It's not easy to be bold or to raise your voice, but it's right and urgent, and I encourage you to keep on speaking out ever more loudly. On many fronts, the consequences of global warming will be even more catastrophic for Japan than for the world as a whole. Ongoing temperature increases are faster in Japan than the world average. Heavy rainfall is increasing, and the negative impacts on agricultural productivity are already being felt. The impacts of sea level rise would be dramatic for Japan, an island where millions of people live in low-lying coastal areas. Japan has a proud history of climate leadership, not least the Kyoto Protocol. Yet, in the past decade, this resolve has wavered. What has been of great encouragement to me in recent months, however, is the re-emergence of this pioneering spirit. I have travelled to Japan several times over the past year, and I've been encouraged by the commitment, not just of young people, but also of business, to ambitious climate action. More than 200 Japanese businesses now support the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures, committing to the type of transparency we need to see from corporations across the world. Environment Minister Shinjiro Koizumi has stressed publicly and to me in person his desire to see Japan make a powerful contribution to tackling the climate crisis, including a commitment to decarbonisation. All of Japan's politicians now need to build on this momentum and show real leadership on the global stage. We can only tackle the climate crisis together. While it's a great individual honour to be acknowledged by the Earth Hall of Fame Kyoto for my work on climate justice, it's only when we take collective responsibility and action that the kind of change that is needed for our world will occur. All of us, school children, adults, private businesses, organisations, and of course governments and world leaders need to take action. We need all of humanity. The planet depends on it. Arigato.
Robinson 様、ありがとう。
So that was the video message by Miss Robinson. I really appreciate. And we are going to rearrange the stage, so please wait for a second.
皆様お待た
Okay, thank you very much. Now we would like to begin a panel discussion. The theme of the panel discussion is Connecting to the Future, Climate Change and the Earth of Today. For that, we have invited the expert in the environment, people from local high schools as well as the business. I'd like to invite each panelist. First of all, Deputy Director, Center for Global Environment Research, Dr. Seita Emory. The co-chair, IPCC Task Force on National Greenhouse Inventory, Dr. Kyoto Tanabe. Co-chair, the Japan Climate Leaders Partnership, JCLP, and also the Lexel Corporation, General Manager for EHS, Mr. Toshihiro Kawakami. And next is a student from local high schools. First of all, Ms. Amiko Yamasaki from Saikyo High School, and Ms. Miyu Ogawa from Rakuhoku High School, and Ms. Moe Horiuchi from Dosha High School. They are the second and third graders. And the moderator for this symposium is Professor Makoto Usami, the Graduate School of Global Environment Studies, Kyoto University.
Professor Usami, please. As has been introduced, my name is Usami from Kyoto University. I would like to act as the coordinator of this session. You might remember this. 2 years ago, 2018, there was a great climate disaster which hit us. In July, there was a very heavy rainstorm and then very extreme heat during the summer. 39.8 degrees C was the record-making temperature in Kyoto. At that time, as has been broadcasted, there were people who passed away, 133 people because of the heat. And 54,000 people were sent to the hospital on ambulance. And when we face this kind of experience, we feel that this is a natural disaster. It is a natural phenomena. However, after this, in Japan, what was announced in Japan as a result of a research is that this extreme heat during the summer was due to CO2 emitted by human beings or human activity. And it is due to the climate change because of the anthropogenic activity. And another part is due to natural phenomena, and the percentage between the two is being researched. This research is going on throughout the world, but this same research was conducted in Japan as well. And according to this research, in July of 2 years ago, if there was no climate change that we are experiencing today, that kind of extreme heat would not have happened. The possibility would have been zero. And because of the anthropogenic climate change, at that timing, at that extreme heat occurred, and the probability increased by 20%. And the increase of probability became a reality which killed many people and damaged many people's health. So I should say that climate change is occurring, and including Kyoto in Japan, realistically, it is giving us adverse impact. This is something that we should recognize. However, the problem is, as has been mentioned so far, when we look overseas beyond Japan, there are many critical phenomena. The small island nations in the Pacific Ocean, the people who live in these small islands have to be dislocated. They cannot live any longer in their home islands. And West Africa, according 30 centimeters of the coastline is being damaged and destroyed because of the climate change. So this is the level of climate change that we are facing, which is causing very serious problems throughout the world. So this is the reality that we live in. And considering that, the fact that IPCC was selected as an inductee to the Earth Hall of Fame Kyoto, and also the fact that Mary Robinson, who is advocating climate justice, to also be selected as the inductee is a very timely and a commemorative fact. And so, based upon this induction, we would like to discuss on the theme of climate change. So first, I would like to invite the panelists. I would like to first introduce the characteristic of this panel discussion before inviting the panelists to speak. As has been said, this year, we have 3 high school students as part of our panelists, and this is the first time we have tried this. because climate change is a very serious issue. And these younger generation will have longer years to live. They have longer years for the rest of their lives compared to us. Therefore, we have asked high school students to participate as the panelists. The discussion will be divided into two parts, basically. The first part, we will have the three expert panelists to make presentations. And after that, we will have some discussion. And if time allows, we would like to entertain some questions from the audience, from the floor as well. We would like to welcome questions from the younger generation as much as possible. And so if time allows, we would like to do that. So let's move on to the presentation by the panelists. First, may I introduce Dr. Emori.
So, Dr. Emery, the climate change that is happening, that is invisible, right? We can't really see it. Therefore, I would like to ask him to make a presentation to explain the gravity of this issue, how climate change made its progress. So that is something we want to know. And also your future forecast, how it's going to further progress, and also the causes of the climate change. So these are the topics I would like to ask you to explain to us. Thank you very much for the introduction. This is Emily from the Center for Global Environmental Research. So climate science, especially I am in computer simulation for future forecast. So with IPCC, I belong to the #1 working group, and I joined assessment report 5, and also I am in the part of assessment report 6. So as been just explained, in a global scale, how the climate change making a progress. So let me explain. And this shows the global average temperature starting from 1950 to recent years. And the red one is the year of El Nino, blue one is a year of La Nina. Though that causes the temperatures on the sea surface, and without human cause, that actually changes. And because of this, that the temperature goes on ups and downs. However, as you can see, starting from 1980s and 1990, temperature started to increase so rapidly. And around that time, that this temperature rise drew a lot of attention. In 1997, the Kyoto Protocol was adopted. And after that, in around the year 2000, temperature doesn't seem to be increasing. And there are many people who criticize the science of the climate. But all the scientists know that it would once again start to rise, and it's actually happened. So my message here is that the temperature, of course, goes ups and downs due to natural factors. So in short term, it is really difficult to see the anthropologic factors, but for long term, you can see the trend of temperature. And IPCC tried to identify the causes of temperature rise. They made a lot of assessment. This is a result of the 5th assessment report. This shows the temperature changes since 1910 for a century. So black one is change of the temperature, and especially, as you can see, it started to rise in around 1980s or so. What are the reasons behind this? Many scientists try to review that question, and here the computer simulation plays a role. It's look at the temperature of the atmosphere, temperatures on the ocean, land surface, and then they apply the physical principles into this computer simulation. And the result shows that if there's no anthropogenic factors, then temperature is supposed to go into the blue line. Therefore, this rise cannot be explained by the natural factors. And red line, that include anthropogenic factors, that's actually blue, or the black line is within this red areas. So this shows that an actual temperature rise is probably due to the anthropogenic factors. So probability is very high. That is how it's explained in the fifth assessment report. I'm not sure whether it's going to be how it's going to be explained in the sixth assessment report. And what about the future forecast? Is depending on our activity, how we're going to take an action on that. This is the result of a simulation looking into 2100. The red line is basically business as usual scenarios. So the world will continue to rely on fossil fuel, emitting CO2s without taking action. And the blue one is different. Blue one is with a lot of countermeasures, successful countermeasures. Without the countermeasures, that the Paris Agreement target 2 degrees C, possibly 1.5 degrees C increase could be possible in the scenario of the blue line. And also here, if you compare to the business as usual and 2 degrees C or lower case, this is a result of simulation of temperature changes in different parts of the world. And this is a video clip. There are two world maps. The upper one is without any countermeasures, and lower one is the 2 degrees C or lower case. The red one is increasing temperatures, and blue one is decreasing temperatures. So would you please compare the two? So as you can see, first of all, that red comes in, goes out, blue comes in and goes out. This is natural changes of temperature. So climate changes only with natural factors. And if you look at Arctic areas, you see the more red in Arctic area. And so now it's 2020, so now it's over 2020. So in 2020 or 2030, there's no striking difference between the two maps. However, then starting from these years, you will see a striking difference in 2060. You see, especially the map on the upper areas, you see a temperature rise, overwhelming temperature rise in Arctic areas. This is 2100. In 2100, the upper map shows the 4 degrees C global average temperature increase. And excluding Arctic areas, the sea surface has a lower increase. And also northern hemisphere and areas which is close to the Arctic areas, the temperature rises like 6 degrees C, 7 degrees C, or 8 degrees C. And if you look at the lower map, that is a temperature rise. So there's a striking difference between the two scenarios. So we must achieve that simulation. That's what's shown in the lower map. And Dr. Lee already explained this. So in Paris Agreement, this shows what is a GHG emission reduction required to come close to the 1.5 degrees C. And that in order to achieve this, we must achieve a net zero in 2050 in order to achieve 1.5 degrees C scenario. And so this is the requirement to limit global warming by 2 degrees C and possibly by 1.5 degrees C. So this is a national consensus, international consensus. In the Paris Agreement, when this long-term and goal was adopted, I was so positively surprised. And Kyoto City also declared, and also Kyoto Prefecture today, I was surprised, but Kyoto Prefecture declared the net zero by 2050. So please think about this. Right now, we are emitting CO2s in large quantity, and by 2050, they are now targeting at achieving net zero. And now this is achieved or agreed upon in international agreement, in the Paris Agreement. This is such a challenging task for international society. So this is the end of my talk. Thank you very much.
今江森さんの方から説明いただいたような
So as Dr. Emory just explained, the climate change making a progress, rapid progress, and actually IPCC, the new inductee, was established due to this issue. So now I would like ask next panelist to explain about IPCC, how IPCC was established, and also what is the activity. Dr. Lee already explained some of those, but I'd like to ask the next panelist to give us the overview of the activities of IPCC. So or maybe he can explain how Japan has contributed to the IPCC, or maybe he can talk about what he does at IPCC. So Dr. Tanabe, please.
ありがとうございます。
Thank you. I belong to the inventory task force, and I act as a co-chair of the task force. My name is Kyoto Tanabe, and because my name sounds like Kyoto, I feel very familiar and close to Kyoto, and I'm very honored to be able to speak in front of the Kyoto people. Let me introduce you to IPCC. There may be some redundancy to what has been already said, but allow me. So this is an intergovernmental panel for climate change, and it was established in 1988 by the World Meteorological Organization and UN Environment Program. And in the UN Assembly, it was endorsed. The background of the establishment of IPCC is because the climate change issue became an international political issue in the 1980s, and therefore for the policymakers it was decided, or it was recognized, that a system was necessary to provide advice from the perspective of science and technology as an independent entity. And in 1988, UN General Assembly endorsed the action by WMO and UNEP in jointly establishing IPCC. IPCC is established and writes a report based upon the volunteering contribution by the scientists throughout the world. And so it is entity due to the contribution by various scientists. And I think it was the first endeavor in the world that the scientists are cooperating to provide advice to the policymakers. It is not IPCC who conducts its own research. We collect the research throughout the world, and we assemble them and provide scientific evaluation and assessment and information to the policymakers as an independent entity. And IPCC reports are policy relevant but not policy prescriptive. What it means is that IPCC supports the policymakers to make policies or decide on policies, and for that purpose, we provide various advice to the policymakers, but we do not force the policymakers to make such and such policies or to make such and such decisions. There are various aspects to the climate change issue. Therefore, we need to look into the issue from various perspectives. We have 4 working groups with different expertise. From the left, working group 1, 2, and 3, and on the right-hand side, there is a task force on national greenhouse gas inventories. So these are the 4 groups. This explains the global warming issue very simply. Due to human activity, CO2 and greenhouse gas is emitted, and this is concentrated in the atmosphere, and the concentration of CO2 and CHG increases. That leads to the changes in the natural environment. And the natural environment change can lead to the livelihood and lives of the people in terms of health and disaster. So this is not a good thing for the human society. Therefore, the human society has to be able to adapt to this climate change on one hand. On the other hand, we need to try to mitigate such change. So these are the 2 responses that are being necessary on the side of the human society to the climate change. So for scientific assessment of these matters, there are 4 groups, and this is the responsibility of working group 1 and 2, and this part is the working group 3's responsibility in order to cover the total area. So what is the cause of global warming? How much of such gas is being emitted by human activity? That needs to be evaluated. And for that, each country is evaluating, assessing, and calculating how much of greenhouse gas is being emitted by each country. And this calculation methodology is being handled by the Task Force on National Greenhouse Gas Inventories. There are secretariat functions throughout Japan for Working Group 1. Technical support unit for Working Group 1 is located in France and China. For Working Group 2, Germany and South Africa. And for Working Group 3, UK and India. And TSU for TFI, the task force, is located in Japan for the last 20 years. So in this way, Japan is contributing to IPCC, and also Mr. Emori and many other Japanese scientists are participating in creating the report. And in this manner, we are contributing greatly to IPCC. So the major activity of IPCC is the comprehensive technical and scientific evaluation with regard to climate change. And we call this assessment report. And this is created every few years. In the past 30 years, we have created such 5 reports. The first one was announced in 1990, which led to the adoption of UNFCCC in 1992. The second assessment report was written in 1995 or announced in 1995, which led to the adoption of the Kyoto Protocol. And after that, in the third and fourth assessment report, there was a great impact to the international negotiation. And the most recent assessment report was released from 2013 to 2014, which led to a great impact to the adoption of Paris Agreement. And right now, we are in the process of writing the 6th assessment report. There are several other types of report, and first, the other report is called the special reports. It deals with a specific issue of climate change. It dives in deeply into a special or a certain topic of climate change. And these are the themes which special reports have been written on in the past. Another type of report is methodology report. It is a report for each country to be able to calculate the emission and absorption amount of greenhouse gas of each country. And this is a task force for inventory, which I belong to. So we are in the process of creating the 6th assessment report, and this has started in 2018. And in this cycle, 8 reports are to be written, and 4 has been written already. The one that was approved in 2018 is a special report on global warming of 1.5 degrees, and 2 more special reports have been written. One is special report on climate change and land. Another is a special report on the ocean and cryosphere in the changing climate. And also last May, in this hall, a methodology report was adopted. 2019 refinement to the 2006 IPCC guideline for national GHG inventories was adopted and released. And other reports will be assessment reports of each working group, and they will be released starting from 2021. IPCC it consists of chairs and vice chairs and co-chairs. As you can see, experts from all over the world is gathered in order to operate IPCC. And I am on the right bottom here. Right now, Dr. Hoesung Lee is the chair of IPCC at present. Hoesung Lee has participated to IPCC report creation from Korea for many years, and he was a co-chair of Working Group 3. And after that, he acted as the vice chair of IPCC, and from October of 2015, he has been appointed as the chair of IPCC to lead the organization. So as you can see, many reports have been released by IPCC, and from next year to 2 years from now, the 6th cycle of assessment report will be released, and I hope that you will be looking forward to that. Thank you very much. So with respect to the present climate change cause is the greenhouse gas emission, and in order to reduce that, effort must be made from the private sector as well as to target net zero CO2 emission. So now I would like to ask Mr. Kawakami to make his presentation. From the business point of view, how are you seeing this issue of climate change? And also, how are the private sector making effort to reduce greenhouse gas emission? And also, Mr. Kawakami is going to talk about the efforts made by his company, the company that he is working for.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kawakami. I am co-chair of JCLP, and also I belong to Dixie Corporation. I was in Kyoto when I was a student, so it's a great opportunity to come back to Kyoto and contribute to your discussion. Please look at this picture. This is a picture taken at the COP21. This is a side event of the COP21 where the Paris Agreement was adopted. These are business leaders from Google, Unilever, IKEA, Kellogg, Bank of America. They are CEOs and CFOs who is responsible for the finance of the companies. They joined in this discussion. And then I just noticed the climate change. This is an environmental issue, but it's also the issue of the business as well. This is a management issue of the business as well. And Japan CLP is a Japan Climate Leadership Partnership, and they are 134 companies as members, and their total revenue is 111 trillion Japanese yen, accounting for about 15% of the total revenue of the Japanese businesses. So this is a quite large size. This is a voluntary activity based on organization. So we discuss how we incorporate climate change into their business strategy, how we contribute to society in climate change. And JCLP see climate change as a challenge for business management. This is a crisis and also opportunity for business management. So why it is crisis is because natural disaster poses a great risk on the operation, business operation. But at the same time, climate change is an opportunity. It's because going forward, as being explained by Dr. Emori and Dr. Tanabe, towards 2050, society will be transitioned to decarbonized society. So this is really a transformation of the society, the way society is really functioning. And in this transition or transformation, we businesses must survive. We must adapt. Otherwise, we're going to be eliminated from the market. But if you're able to adapt, if you grab the chance, you can also see a lot of opportunities from the business perspective as well. And this is not only for private sectors, and this is also related to the social environment. For example, government, the UK, they have a net zero by 2050. They have a law for that. And also German government is planning to introduce a carbon tax. And also many countries are promoting the eco-friendly vehicles. They are banning gasoline vehicles or diesel vehicles. And also in New York, they have a Climate Mobilization Act. New York is such a big city. And the buildings account for 71% of CO2 emissions in New York City. So in order to decarbonize the city, that they must first decarbonize buildings. And they already began activity and new law was enacted. And when it comes to civil society, the climate justice is now expanding to different parts of the world. And ESG. So with private sector, we basically gather the fund from the institutional investors, and we efficiently run these financial capacity to make our business. And here we see a trend of the ESG investment. ESG investment is now a mainstream. So it means not only the businesses, entire society is now changing. These are logos of different companies. And this is companies. There are 240 companies who are members of the RE100. This is just some of those companies. As you can see, there are many well-known companies. And what is RE100? So in RE100, they are doing a lot of effort to change the power into renewable energy. So they shifting towards wind power or solar panel-based powers in their operations. And there are, as I said, more than 240 companies. So demand side, like businesses, they declare active use of the renewable energy. And by doing so, they send a message to suppliers or energy company. So that incentivize energy companies to build the new renewable energy plants. For example, So this is such an initiative. The Lixil, the company I belong to, declared the RE100, and we are making a lot of endeavor to switch over to renewable energy. In Karasuma Oike, we have a showroom in Kyoto as well, and this Kyoto showroom is in a first office base that we already converted entirely into renewable energy source. And that positive cycle is now being realized in Japan. Right now, 31 companies declare for RE100 in Japan, and Japan COC account for most of those 31 companies. So we are leading the activity of RE100, aggressively converting into renewable energy sources. And also RE100 target at large-scale companies. Therefore, the small and mid-sized enterprises and non-profit organization or local government, religious organization, hospitals, they cannot be part of RE100. Therefore, Japan CLE leading a project of the Renewable 100 declaration. Here that we encourage small and mid-sized companies, schools, local government to join these activities. And in Kyoto, the Heian Jugakuin School and also Kyoto City are part of already this activity. And also like to share with you what we do at our own company. Lixil is targeting at the 2050 and net zero CO2 by joining RE100 and other activities. And as you can see in the slide, that we provide then these housing equipment and building equipment in Japan and also global market. And what can we do through our product? So this is kind of the exercise that we had in the life cycle of the product. So we provide our raw materials, and raw materials assemble into product, and those products are delivered to customers, and they're used at the customer site, and it's going to be disposed. And if you look at the life cycle, the use is the most important factor. Here that if you have eco-friendly the water tap, or if you have the high efficiency hybrid window, it can contribute to energy saving. And this is a collaboration with our client and with our employees. We have the My Borrow promotion activity, and also we have an activity called Sink Heat. And today we don't have any plastic water bottles. So we encourage employees to get rid of the plastic bottles by having their own bottles, so they can just bring their own bottle from their home, so that they don't need to buy any plastic bottle. So this is a summary. We see the climate crisis is a business opportunity. At the same time, this is a risk, but this is an opportunity as well. So we're creating new society. Society will transform dramatically. There has been major changes in the past. For example, a company who manufacture the hose carriage that was replaced by the steam engine-based train. So with the new technology, many companies come and go, and we must survive in this social transition. And so in order to do so, we are actively engaged in the climate action to contribute to society as well.
それではですね、お三方から
So based upon the presentations that we have heard, we would like to go on to discussion as has been introduced. The for the first time in the history of the International Symposium for the Earth Hall of Fame, we have panelists from high schools. And so with regard to this long-term issue of climate change, how are high school students feeling about this issue? So I would like to ask Ms. Yamazaki, amongst the high schools or youngsters, how do you accept this climate change issue? And what do you think of this issue yourself, Ms. Yamazaki? Yes, thank you. The young people want to cooperate. And with regard to climate change discussion, we are very interested, is what I would like to say. However, that is not the case. When we hear of the bushfire in Australia and when we hear of various incidents due to climate change, with regard to these disasters, we just follow the news, and we do not really consider what is the cause of such disaster, and we do not have great interest as to how to alleviate such disasters. With regard to myself, with regard to climate change, I understand that this is anthropogenic, and therefore 1.5 degrees increase can be attained if we make effort. But as Ms. Robinson has said, rather than the countries who are emitting the GHG, the victims of the climate change are the people who live in small islands and other developing nations who have not been the responsible people for this climate change. So I think it is unjust. We need to really earnestly consider about this injustice that we are facing in the world. Thank you. So as Ms. Yamazaki said, Ms. Robinson, who is one of the inductee, has stressed the term climate justice. And so basically speaking, between the developing countries and developed countries, the acceptance of climate change are quite different, and or the reception of the climate change impact is different. And on the other hand, it is mostly the developed countries who have caused this climate change, and she says that this is injustice. So with regard to climate change, what is the difference of impact to the developed countries and developing countries from the scientific point of view? Yes, thank you very much. First of all, geographically speaking, there are disaster-prone areas where developing countries are located and where native people of the localities are living. The Arctic region has a high temperature rise, as you saw in my map. So a large temperature rise, reducing the amount of glacier and causing great change in the environment, is a place where the native people live. And also in the dried area in Africa and Middle East, the developing countries of these areas who are engaged in small-scale agriculture. And when climate change occurs, there are less rain in the dry area. And because of this, small-scale farmers suffer from drought because of lack of food and income and water. And that can cause increase in refugees, and that can be a cause of disputes or a cause of expansion of disputes. And also the small island nations, and also the like Bangladesh, the mega delta, coastal low-level people is the area where many people live in the developing countries, and these areas will be impacted by sea level rise and also high waves. or high tide. And so these are the geographical calls. On the other hand, the ability to respond to climate change is less than the developed countries. They have less disaster reduction infrastructures. They do not live in strong houses. And also, when they are short of water, they cannot purchase such resources from outside of the nation easily. Therefore, when there is disaster, these people are highly impacted, seriously impacted by the disaster. And so many people can lose their lives, and they can starve because of such disasters in the poor area. As has been introduced, between the developed nations and developing nations, the impact of climate change can vary or can be quite different. And also amongst the developed countries, there are countries who deal with the issue very earnestly, and there are developed countries who are behind in dealing with the climate change issue. And also in the developing countries, there are developing countries which emit much greenhouse gas per capita. So depending on the nation, the situation is quite different. And based upon this, the government of each country have different attitudes. And so I would like to ask Dr. Tanabe, with regard to the leaders of each government in a venue like COP and other international negotiation, I think you have experienced such occasions in many cases. And so based upon your experience, the difference between the developed and developing nations, and also within such nations, I think there are differences in interest and also concerns. So could you update us with the recent tendency or trend? First of all, with regard to UNFCCC, it was established about 30 years ago, and from then, international negotiation have begun. At the initial stage, the structure was developed countries versus developing countries. So it was said that the developed countries were responsible and developing countries were the victims of such impact. However, with more global warming and also because of the changes in the society, the situation seems to be a little different from before. First of all, 30 years ago, apparently, the developed countries have had greater emission, but the developing countries are emitting more in recent years. And also amongst the developing countries, there are small island nations who are very prone to or very vulnerable to the climate change. But there are other developing countries who are impacted greatly because of the poor countermeasures that they have. So it's not that the developing countries are all the same versus the developed countries. In the agreement, the mandate for the developed and developing countries were different. But today, both the developed and developing countries, they are not discriminated, or they are not differentiated with regard to having to deal with countermeasures. And I think that is the base philosophy of Paris Agreement. But having said so, of course, there are differences between the developed and developing nations, but the situation has changed quite a bit since 30 years ago. Thank you very much.
So he just explained the approaches are different depending on countries. But what about in the business world? Mr. Kawakami already explained how the businesses are trying to respond to the climate change. And according to his presentation, many large-sized businesses are doing a lot of effort changing their energy sources into the renewable energy sources. And but still, I believe there are differences depending on countries because of the government initiative or some other factors. And also now in this globalized world, that businesses also extend some assistance and support to the overseas. So would you please share some of your thoughts on that? When it comes to renewable energy, that difference between developing and developed nations, I don't see there's a striking difference because this is about business. From our perspective, if there's a demand for renewable energy, if the businesses can make money, and of course, whether that is developed nations or developing countries, and they can attract an investment. And COP, the Marrakesh COP in Morocco, the local renewable energy initiative was introduced, and actually I visited the solar panels in the vast desert, and they provide power from that solar panel to the city areas. And they attracted an investment from France as well. It's a kind of joint effort between Morocco and France. So whether it makes a business or not, that is what is matter here. And thinking about different countries and regions, that we often talk about the U.S., the Trump administration withdrew from the Paris Agreement. And if you look at Japanese news, those are basically taken as a negative, in a negative way. But also the business people do not really see it as a negative factor. There are many businesses in the U.S., they are making a pledge to the kind of measures against global warming. And in Europe, the UK or Germany, I talked about already in my presentation. So in the EU or the government in Europe, they have already put forward the target. So businesses can see it easier to make an investment because they see clear policy pictures. And my company, Lixil, we declare to join RE100. And with this timing of declaration, we investigated the situation in Europe, and we have already made 100% renewable energy in our European operation. So Japan is actually lagging behind. We must enhance our efforts. So we have just listened to the differences of different countries and regions. So having a global picture is very important, I think. And personally speaking, what I am very much interested in the youth activity in 2018. Around the end of August or beginning of September, the youth movement for environment began. And the video message that Madam Robinson explained, the Friday for Future movement, it's a youth movement for environment. And I just was reminded, September 27 last year, that was a Friday, I was in Berlin, and there was an international meeting regarding environment ongoing in Berlin, and I was invited to as a keynote lecturers, and representative from other countries. One representative said at this conference, so today in this Berlin, how many young people are on the street protesting against the climate issue. And I saw somebody will mention that, but actually after my talk, a doctor, a representative from another countries mentioned this. And especially September 20 of last year was the Global Action Week. So youth were encouraged to take to the street demanding more actions to local government and national government. That was kind of a global activity of youth, a global movement. And also the Friday on September 20th and also Friday on the September 27th, according to the organizer, 1.4 million young people joined. The population of Kyoto City is about 1.4 million. Therefore, the size of the Kyoto City population, the student joined this activity last year. And if you look at other part of the world, actually 6 million young people joined in 150 countries in the week of action of last year. So looking at the situation that the younger people, how they see it, that is very important. And we have already listened to your voice from one student, but next is about this worsening situation of climate change. So looking around the world and also looking around Japan, including Kyoto, many youngsters took to the street. So among youth, what are the movement about the climate action? That is my next question. Just want to ask a student. So maybe Ms. Ogawa, would you please? So as Professor Simon said, the Future for Friday, this is a youth movement demanding businesses and government to take actions against the climate change. And I think this is right. But COP25, around the COP25, despite such demonstrations, the COP25 failed to make an agreement. So simply raising voices cannot really achieve anything. Therefore, we must actually share our will. So we must take an action by ourselves, not just joining such demonstration, but not looking at the things we learn at school. So we must actively understand this issue. We must take an ownership in this issue. For example, by using SNS, we can share information about climate change. In the past, there was no SNS. Therefore, information sharing was only limited. But now, with the power of SNS, just a convenient tool, we are able to communicate with different parts of the world. We can gather information from different parts of the world. Therefore, first, that in order to attract people's attention into this issue, that we leverage the tool of SNS. So by disseminating the climate change issue through the SNS to raise awareness of many people, and also the scientists who are dealing with this issue, or businesses who are very active in dealing with climate action. Maybe you can become such a researcher, or maybe you can join a company that is very active in dealing with climate and change. Next, Ms. Horiyuchi, do you have any comment? So looking at young people taking action, I think that is great. But that's maybe and take too much attention. That is not so good. And if this continues, there will be a great barriers between generations. So younger generations feel angry to the higher generations, older generations, and older generations are a bit perplexed by the anger shown by young generations. So younger generation, with their feeling of anger and doing a movement, initiating movement, I don't actually disagree with that, but I don't feel any anger to all the generations because each generation inherit the previous generation. This is a fate. This is a destiny.
上の世代が
The environmental issue which was caused by the past generation will give us a negative impact, but the older generation also suffered but recovered from poverty, which was caused by the generation before that. So the generations have to inherit the positive and the negative factors from the past generations at all times. I think that is the history. So I don't think there needs to be or there should be any barrier between different generations. I think that the generations should cooperate together. And the movement of the younger generation today is a movement which has an atmosphere that only younger generation can participate. So I think going forward, I think if there was a movement in which parent and child can participate together, I think it would be ideal. Thank you. Applause. Thank you. So amongst the young generation, I think there are many opinions, and I think this multifaceted opinions are very much welcomed. And the Fridays for Future movement is also being supported by many scientists. So I would like to ask Mr. Emori, with regard to young people's movement and also including scientists who are influential, what is the response of the scientific community to such movements? With regard to Fridays for Future, there is also a Scientists for Future which began in Europe. It is a signing movement and also a declaration movement. And so the anger by the younger generation is being supported scientifically, and scientists also support this anger by the younger generation. And that is the phenomena called the Scientists for Future. What Greta is saying is that please listen to the voices of the scientists. So thus it's natural that the scientists say this is true. So to say to support a movement of the younger generation, I don't think is the correct stance. On the other hand, the scientists should be, or the older generation should be more humble. The scientists have disseminated the scientific information to the world, to the society, but the people did not listen to the scientists. However, because of the younger generation's movement, it seems like that more people are listening to the voices of the scientists. And so scientists are thankful to this young people's movement. Thank you. So young people's movement is becoming very active throughout the world. And as a background of that, as has been said from the beginning of this event, the climate change is a very long-term phenomena, and once the CO2 is accumulated in the atmosphere, a part of that would be absorbed by plants or by seawater partially. However, other parts of CO2 in the atmosphere remains for many decades or many centuries. And another part can remain several thousands of years. So it can have a long-term impact. It's a very long-term impactful phenomena. So when we emit much GHG in the 21st century, in the 31st century, or maybe beyond that, the impact can last. So I think we have had a very heated discussion. But again, I would like to ask Mr. Tanabe, the impact of the climate change. In order to mitigate it, at IPCC, you have introduced the goal of IPCC already. And also towards the goal, we have heard about the activities of IPCC. But from the viewpoint of IPCC in the international arena, and also in each country, how does IPCC evaluate, assess the activities conducted in each country or internationally? As I said in my presentation, IPCC is to provide scientific information to the policymakers, but we do not decide on the policies. Please understand that. So IPCC says that the temperature rise should be less than 1.5 degrees. That is a kind of report that is done in the media. However, it's not that IPCC has decided or has enforced that policy. But if we compare 1.5 and 2.0 degrees rise, there is such and such difference. So 2.0 increase will have a greater negative impact to the human society. That is a scientific truth, and that kind of information and fact is being disseminated to the world in the form of reports. And I think that is being delivered and accepted by the younger generation, including Greta. So in order to make the temperature rise less than 1.5 degrees, there needs to be a lot of social innovation or transformation in terms of infrastructure, the system for consumption, including food and so forth. Such transformation is necessary. So if each entity is to make transformation separately, that would not be very successful. So between generations, between nations, I think people should cooperate together in order to tackle this climate change issue. And that is the kind of message that IPCC is disseminating. IPCC is engaged in the outreach activity to the public in general. We are intensifying this kind of activity more than ever. And especially to the younger generation, we want the people to understand more about such scientific information that IPCC is disseminating. So we want to deliver our message to as many people as possible. So with regard to climate change impact, which can be very long-term, and also other impacts that climate change can provide, we have said that it depends all on our activity, it has been said. And so based upon various presumptions, the impact of climate change being assumed, what kind of movement do you see in the business world? Mr. Kawakami's presentation introduced to us 100 renewable energy. You gave us a very elaborated explanation. And to climate change as one of the countermeasures, that would be a mitigation option, I think. And on the other hand, there is the adaptation option. And with regard to these two options, in Dr. Lee's presentation, I think there were such comments, especially in the field of adaptation. If we cannot avoid the long-term impact of climate change, adaptation option is another important option. And I would like to ask, what is the measures made by the private sectors for adaptation? In Kyoto Prefecture, from the viewpoint of business, manufacturings account for a large percentage of the business in total Kyoto Prefecture. As you know, primary industry was our emphasis, which shifted to the secondary industry and then moved on to the tertiary industry. However, in Japan. However, in Kyoto Prefecture, still the manufacturing sector is the majority. And also there is a lot of traditional local industry that is very prosperous in Kyoto Prefecture. So in this kind of locality, if you are considering any adaptation options, what are the measures that you are planning?
Since the Industrial Revolution, the temperature has risen by 1 degree C, and the target of the Paris Agreement is 2 degrees C or 1.5 degrees C. Only with 1 degree C increase, we see a frequent natural disasters. They are now intensifying all around the world that are causing a lot of losses and damages. And in manufacturing industry, the supply chain is a challenge. When you build a new office or relocate it to a new location, you rather tend to think about a safer place for your business operation or relocation of existing office. This is the first thing we look at, and also we evaluate supply chain, where the supply chain is located. And if the supply chain is located in the vulnerable areas, that poses a risk to our business. Taking example of the Lixil, our company. Several years ago, there was a large-scale flood in Thailand, and a plant that's making aluminum components was inundated. So because of this disruption of supply chain, the crescent of the lock of the window cannot be imported from Thailand to Japan. Therefore, we are not able to assemble our product as well. So this is just an example. Therefore, we really pay attention to the integrity of supply chain. If there's a disruption in supply chain, we cannot really supply our product. So this is the one risk. And also in manufacturing industry, that machinery is another important point. Actually, the weather reporter said in a conference I joined that when the ground surface temperature goes up, and it could cause the cyclone, and some houses are broken by this, and that according to the people who live that damaged house, the big wind came in, and this wind comes in the window of the first floor, and it's actually blew away the entire roof. And we have a shutter in our product line. So our product, such as shutter, could be an opportunity for the adaptation. Maybe the shutters could be installed in houses so that they can be more resistant to such natural disasters. This is just an example. Thank you very much. Maybe once you go back to your home, you can just check your house. Okay, so we have mainly discussed two major points. So, two dimensions of climate change that we so far discussed. The one dimension is, as we discussed already, the global perspective. So global dimension, we talk about difference between different countries and regions. And next is about the dimension of generations. So climate change have an impact over different generations. So there is such a time scale and also space scale. So when it comes to the time scale, if you think about the future, the students will be the bearer for the future. They will live longer than us, and they will play a very important role in the society in Japan or society that they live in the future, maybe outside of Japan as well. But they're going to basically bear society of the future. So from that perspective, not only the climate change, but the thinking about the future of the world or future of Japan, how do they see the future, their future? So maybe Ms. Yamazaki first. So looking around the world, that the concerted effort by the international community towards global warming could be challenging because the global GHG emissions, the China, India, US, and Japan still rely on the fossil fuel, including coals, and whether those societies can drive a change, I actually wonder, I suspect. And of course, I understand there are many initiatives and activities in businesses, but these are basically voluntary activities. So I'm not sure whether all businesses will be involved in such activities. I'm not sure, and therefore, globally speaking, there must be some binding mechanism or binding rules and regulations in the Paris Agreement. Of course, they have a target. They have a national GHG inventory target, but it's not legally binding. Therefore, some countries are not so much committed to achieving that, and also some countries already withdrew from the agreement. I myself take a train every morning to commute to my school. So I have a question here to the audience. Those who have taken a train, car, or buses to come to the International Conference Center. Okay, so when they use the transportation, they need to rely on transportation that emit the CO2s. So in order to bring about the drastic change, we must have the legally binding mechanism, and also Governor Nishiwaki and declare the target at zero emission by 2050, but this must be in a larger scale. It must spread through different parts of the world. I just want to make a comment. As you all know, when you move from one location to another location, depending on transportation method you use, the level of CO2 emissions or GHG emissions is very different. Therefore, people are encouraged to take public transportation rather than taking their own cars. So that there isn't such a difference. That must be also well understood by general public. Next, Ms. Ogawa. If this goes on in Japan, that because of the awareness of Japanese people in climate change is so low, therefore Japan will be lagging behind. So the first thing that Japan must do is to change the awareness of the Japanese people. First, doubt. The media is an issue. Media do not really actively talk about the climate change issue, and because of this, there is no interest in the general public as well. And because there's no interest in general public, therefore, the journalists do not talk about this. Is a vicious circle. And also education. At schools in Japan, they talk about environmental issues like CO2 emissions, which is increasing, or deforestation, or the extension of species. And also they encourage children to turn off their light to reduce the CO2 emissions. So those are typical and surface knowledge are only transferred to the students. But those typical on the surface knowledge cannot solve this issue. It's very difficult for a student to get interest in this issue. And also don't have much time to take our own initiative to learn about the environmental issue of climate change. So this is not their day-to-day kind of activities. So we all must take it as their own issue. For example, the students, that what school can do is to listen to their own view, the students' own view about the climate change. They give some time, give some opportunity for students to think about the climate change issue. Then you show the video clip. In a video clip, maybe you can explain the ice in the Arctic areas is being melted, and also you can explain some event that is happening to closer to their community. For example, event in Japan or event in their own community. And so by just having such time and let students think about climate change or environmental issues themselves, they can deepen their understanding. Then they can have some group discussion as well, so that they can exchange their views about the climate change among students themselves. That's maybe contribute to greater interest among students in climate change. So by changing the way of education, way of teaching, maybe you can raise awareness of students, and once they grow up, that society may change as well. Therefore, the first step is to change education system on the environment. Okay, thank you very much.
を聞いたという
I think it seems like that was a wonderful speech with respect to education. So here we have high school students and also high school teachers as well. So I hope that you will make reference to what has been said. And now, Ms. Horiuchi, what do you think? I think that in order to solve the climate change issues, more technology should be developed. Of course, we should be more aware in order to reduce CO2 or to make best use of our limited resources, but that is not sufficient. I think this is very much limited. I heard about with air conditioner can be shifted as an equipment to emit CO2, to absorb CO2. It's a cloud oil system. This is research done by a German person. But in order to implement this, more technology needs to be developed. And that's what I read. I think Japanese people are very patient people, and we are very careful in creating many things. So I think a cloud oil technology can be developed by the Japanese people. And also, I think the world is going to be more cooperative going forward, because we are using SNS. And these younger generations who are using SNS will become adults and will be leading the society and the world, and we will take more actions more proactively. And I think this SNS system will be expanding to the following generations. So using SNS, I think there will be more population using SNS. And with that, I think the total world will be able to share information more and more rapidly, and I think that will lead to a better unification of the world, and that is what I assume, and also what I predict, and also what I expect. So from the experts and also from high school students, we have heard many opinions, and now I would like to ask Dr. Lee of IPCC, which has become an inductee. Listening to the panel discussions so far, I would like to ask you, what is your impression of the panel discussion? Could you share with us your comment, please?
Illuminating and very informative. And I was organizing all the comments into some specific several elements that we, not only the IPCC, but the specialists as well as stakeholders interested in this aspect always concern. And I may indicate that all these elements, discussions can come down to one is efficiency, the other is equity. And specifically, we have heard a lot about the movement, the youth movement or citizens movement to expedite this decarbonization. And we need to think that, first of all, how can I decarbonize? How can I achieve decarbonization? And I can certainly reduce energy consumption, but to meaningfully reduce my energy consumption, I need help from a variety of stakeholders. First of all, I think that the government and industry that we are all associated with should be able to provide a right policy as well as a right infrastructure so that I can have a choice of selecting a low carbon consumption patterns. For instance, we talked about a transportation, and it is very obvious that using mass transportation helps reduce carbon emissions. But in many parts of the world, consumers, many individuals, inhabitants, do not have that choice. Walking is just the only option. So the important thing is that the society be able to create more options, more choices, so that consumers can have their consumption decision in favor of a rapid decarbonization. We need to think that this decarbonization requires a multiple inputs from business, policymakers, and as well as consumers. That's the reason why citizens, why youth, young generations ask policymakers, politicians to do something. There, to do something implies that right environment for investment, right environment for technology development, right environment for rational consumption choice. And in that regards, I think this movement is a very, very positive direction. We talked a lot about justice, climate justice. Climate justice is one reason why we need to have a rapid decarbonization. But we also need to think about this rapid decarbonization will create, I'm sure, will create a disruption in the society, because there will be sectors, will be a new gain, will be sectors that gains from this transition, and there will be sectors that lose their the wealth, current position from this transition. The society needs to embrace all these newly created disadvantaged groups along this transition. Therefore, climate justice is very important to expedite the decarbonization, but at the same time, equitable transition is as much important as just this climate justice. I think that today's conference is a very significant from my perspective in understanding the various aspects of the improving, making realization of this rapid decarbonization. I think that this 2020, the first year in the decade of decarbonization, hosted this conference, providing a great deal of implications for all of us to achieve throughout this decade. Thank you very much.
ありがとうございました。
Thank you very much. I think many of you were listening to his comment through simultaneous interpretation. But I would like to re-emphasize that for decarbonization, I think he talked about the importance of preparing the environment for that, and the cooperation of various sectors is necessary for that. And also he mentioned the word transition, that is transition towards new society. I think this importance was also emphasized. So time is becoming short, but as has been said at the very beginning, I would like to now entertain some questions from the audience. Maybe I would like to accept one or two questions, especially from the younger people. Do you have any questions or comments? Yes, please, from here and from here. I'm sorry, I would like to accept all of the questions, but time is limited, so let me accept these two questions. So from you yourself, please.
I'm from the Hokuryo High School. My name is Keizo Yamada. I have a question for Dr. Kawakami. In Japan, to convert into renewable energy. In order to do so, Japan has technology and Japan has the economic scale to change over to the renewable energy. And despite the voices raised by younger generation, I don't see progress in converting into renewable energies in business sectors, and why? And also, is there any strengths in energy sector, strengths of Japan in energy sectors? Okay, due to time concern, I'd like to take another question, so another person. Then, like to ask panelists to answer back their questions. I am from Hokuryo High School. My name is Saki Terada. I have a question for Dr. Emori and Dr. Tanabe. I have two questions, actually. The first question, in the panel discussion, you touched upon a little bit, but the youth in different parts of the world take to the street, but they often don't have the voting rights. So maybe they can find another effective action towards the government. So is there any opportunity, any alternative movement of youth who do not have any voting right? And also the Japanese high school students, how do you see, how do you expect from the Japanese high school student towards their climate and action? So would you please respond back to those questions just briefly due to time constraint? So maybe starting from Dr. Emori and then Dr. Tanabe, then Mr. Kawakami. Is that okay? Okay, thank you. Thank you for your question. So young people who don't have any voting right, actually this is already happening. Whether they have the voting right or if they don't, it doesn't matter. On the other day, there was an elections for the mayor of Kyoto, and the three candidates were asked about climate change. Actually, Fridays for Future Kyoto made an interview with the three candidates asking their own climate change initiatives. that was actually broadcast through the YouTube, I was so impressed positively. And I myself, I appeared in a TV program of the NHK. So I encourage young people to ask questions regarding climate change to the candidate. By doing so, you are able to show the voters are interest in the climate change that is already taking place in Kyoto. So this is just an example. And also, how I see a younger generation of Japan. Well, it's not only for the high school students, but what I see nowadays, that I think they must have a positive view on this. Of course, they must have the maximum level of understanding about the crisis, but they shouldn't be in despair. They shouldn't stand against any economic growth, or I don't recommend them to go to extreme to become more poor, or like standing against the economy. They must take this issue from more positive perspective. Next, Dr. Tanabe. Thank you for your question. First of all, young people who do not have any voting right, I think there are a lot of things you can do, and that is already being there in different parts of Japan as well. And my additional comment is that maybe at your house, so when you speak with your parent or your senior sisters and brothers, and maybe you can speak about climate change to the parent or your brothers and sisters. So when you speak to them, you can say that global warming is such a critical issue for my generation. I'm not saying that you should influence their voting activity, but by letting your parents know how you feel, that they can also take the viewpoint of younger generation. And also that the sense of the young people, I think one student said that Japanese young people are not so much interested in climate and change, but compared to my own high school age, I kind of feel shame of my student or high school student time. So I see much more an active movement and also high awareness of environmental issues in the current high school students. And there was a point made about SNS. Right, SNS is very effective too, but SNS is a double-edged sword. There are a lot of fake news, so you must be careful about that. And concerning hopes on Japan, the COP is basically a negotiation between different nations, but in the COP meetings, many local governments, many businesses play crucial roles in recent years. Therefore, city of Kyoto, or Kyoto Prefecture, or the Lixio, or JCLP, those private sector's initiative or initiative from local government, and those are a very good example that Japan can share with other countries. So I see a lot of hopes on the activity of Japan. Thank you very much. And now, Mr. Kawakami. So the reason why renewable energies is making progress, because it's expensive, and also there are different adverse conditions specific to Japan. And in Morocco, I just talked about you can generate power by having panel discussions in the desert. There's no rain, there's no typhoon, but in Japan is prone to typhoon, earthquake, and so this is one a disadvantage of Japan in terms of the solar panel, because there are many natural disaster-prone areas in Japan, so selection is an issue. But our Kyoto office converted to renewable energy 100%, and when this project was going on, that we compare the price of the conventional power source and renewable energy sources, and I don't see much difference in the price. Therefore, it might be difficult to introduce renewable energy or convert to renewable energy entirely in larger scale, like plants, but in smaller offices, or the price I don't see is not so the disadvantage of the renewable energy. Therefore, those who are in this hall, if you come from the businesses, please join in RE actions, or if you are from a large company, please join the RE 100 activities. That can actually change the entire atmosphere of the business world. I have a comment, just one comment, that there is an English dictionary, Oxford Dictionary. This is most authoritative English dictionary that speaks a word of the year. And last year, that the frequency of the word that's increased by 100 times. And this is the word of the 2019. That was the climate crisis. That was chosen as the word of the year in 2019 by this dictionary. So now climate crisis is talked about a lot in the international community. But on the other hand, we see a lot of hints and clues in our panel discussion. And in order to create a better future or sustainable society, what can we do? I think we learned a lot from this panel discussion. There are many clues and hints from the scientists and also high school students, and that was very encouraging for me as well. And with the remarks, I'd like to bring an end to the panel discussion for this year. And so I would like to ask the audience to give a round of applause to all the panelists. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, the panelists, and also the coordinator, Professor Usami. Thank you very much. Let us give them another big round of applause. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. There were many opinions that were raised, and I think we were able to have a very significant half a day together with you. Thank you. With this, we would like to conclude the International Symposium of the Earth Forum Kyoto. The questionnaires that have been distributed will be collected in the box outside of this room. Also, with regard to the receiver for simultaneous interpretation, please return them to the staff member or staff members right outside of this room. And also, please return your name tag as well. Thank you very much for coming to the International Symposium of the Earth Forum Kyoto today. In front of the main hall, Mr. Emori, Mr. Usami's books are being sold out in the hallway, so please drop by. Thank you very much for your attendance. Goodbye.